Welcome to Driving Alpha, where we feature our friends, the outperforming investors who demonstrate their path to driving alpha or outsized investment returns. We're Alpha Partners, where we partner with 1,000 early-stage venture firms as their opportunity capital to invest in their best companies. Driving Alpha is supported by Affinity, provider of the CRM for the private capital relationship economy. Affinity knows who has the best relationship with the right startup. Affinity knows. Learn more at affinity.co/driving alpha.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Driving Alpha podcast, where we interview top GPs to talk about how they drive alpha for their founders, their LPs, and the rest of the entrepreneurial ecosystem. Now, I am thrilled today to be joined by Ihar Mahaniok, founder and managing partner at Geek Ventures. So Ihar started coding at only 12 years old and eventually went on to work at tech giants such as Google and Facebook, and later served as the VP of engineering at Lightning AI, focusing on AI and machine learning. He began angel investing over a decade ago, investing in more than 100 companies, including 5 unicorns such as Instacart, People AI, and PandaDoc. In 2021, Ihar launched Geek Ventures, a fund based in New York focused on early-stage immigrant founders building in the AI and robotics space. Geek Ventures aims to drive equal opportunities for these visionary entrepreneurs through capital and connections. Now, thank you for joining us, Ihar. Can you please start a little bit more about your journey and what led you to starting Geek Ventures?
Thank you very much for inviting me, Zoe, and actually for giving such a great introduction. So I think the most important is that I was always in tech, but I was also always interested in both business and technology together, right? So technology was something that I covered through engineering, through coding, but it was not enough for me. So I actually went out to the conferences since I joined Google and even before, and met a lot of founders, which led me to build a network and then eventually starting to invest in these companies as an angel investor. And after almost a decade of basically balancing both engineering leadership on one side and investing in companies on the other side, led me to see that I would be much more interested to just focus on investing in technology, especially AI and ML, and actually bring in more opportunity, right? So one of the things that I believe in is that talent is distributed evenly while opportunity is not. And with this focus on immigrant founders that are overlooked and underfunded, you can see some amazing, brilliant entrepreneurs who are destined for huge success, who still are struggling in the very beginning to find somebody who will believe in them, mainly through being underconnected, through not being in the right networks, because, for example, they moved recently and so on. So all of that was inspiration for me to start Geek Ventures. And yeah, I've been running it for 4 years as of now, and it's just something that I love doing.
So, you are an immigrant yourself, and you've built up a very strong network, strong enough that you could help these other immigrant entrepreneurs. Can you talk a little bit more about your background there and how you navigated coming to the US and building up such a robust network?
So yeah, I moved to the US back in 2013 when I was still at Google. And I already, of course, pre-built my network before fully moving here because I was part of Google. I was already visiting the US for business trips for many, many years. And when I moved fully to New York, I started from day one to get deeply integrated in a New York angel and venture ecosystem, right? So for example, I joined the angel community called Empire Angels. I started to go to a lot of accelerators, accelerated demo days, trying to be helpful. I ended up being a mentor at several accelerators, ERA, Grand Central Tech, Venture Out. I was invited to judge startups and or give advice to startups or speak on panels a lot. And all of that helped me to see more and more companies. And of course, through big tech companies like Google and then later Facebook, they also have their own startup networks through their alumni, right? So people who leave those companies go and start their own companies, right? So I kept in touch with those. And naturally, I'm a networker by my own personality, right? So I think I was heavy user of LinkedIn something like 15 years ago when many people didn't. And whenever I went to a conference or an event, I really wanted to make sure I connect with interested people, and then I follow up and talk to them. So that all together, and also, of course, being somebody who can try to bring value to people, mainly through connections, but also through sharing some knowledge, was also very important, right? So, for example, through speaking to so many founders, I saw some issues that they struggled with and some solutions that they came up with, right? So next time I came across a startup that would do the same, that would try to go to the same problem and try to attempt the same solution that I've already seen before, I could bring it up and share. People valued that, right? When people were looking for some kind of introduction, I could often be able to introduce them to somebody, right? Of course, I knew about great events, and one of these important networking hacks was to tell people who are coming to New York or come to the US which events they can visit, especially in events that are hard to get into.
Got it. And then just focusing on that last point, I mean, if you've built up a reputation network well enough that people from abroad, when they come and visit New York, come to you, what did it really take to get to that point and for you to be that person? Was it really just being able to facilitate all these connections? And also, how do you keep all of this in your head and know who to connect to what? Do you have any tips that, we could share with the listeners to kind of that would allow them to put themselves in this position where people think of, this is the people connector that this is the person I should go to.
First of all, I know a lot of people characters who are even better than me, right? So, and I don't claim to be the best there, but what I know is that there are several important things. First of all, I do use LinkedIn as my main tool to keep my network and keep in touch. And there are a few tips there that I use, that I don't accept 90% of people who, or 95% of people who send me inbound connection requests. I only accept people who I actually met at least once, right? At least on an event, or at least on a Zoom call, or people who I immediately see I really want to talk with, right? So, and these are minorities. So I think I have about 5,000 connections on LinkedIn, and at least like 4,500 of them, I really know who this person is, and we spoke at least once, right? And of course, many of them we spoke a lot of times. That's one angle. Another angle on the opposite side is I create public content on LinkedIn, and I recommend to everybody, right? So, which means that content that not only my contacts can consume, but my followers, right? So LinkedIn has actually this weird switch that you can allow to follow you or not, right? And I think everybody should allow to follow. So I create content, and then there are several things. First of all, people who I don't know start knowing me and following me through LinkedIn and through other public spaces like Twitter. But people who know me, who met me once, then through LinkedIn, they get to know me more, right? So, and for example, you met on a conference, and if there was no LinkedIn and there was like a phone in your phone book, a half a year later, a year later, people will not remember who this person was and they spoke 5 minutes in a conference. But if you show up in their feed every week or every month, then at some point they just remember, oh, this is Zoe. She works on Alpha. She does this kind of stuff, right? So she invests in this kind of companies, right? So, and then people start knowing who you are, and I get to know who they are, right? Of course, it's both ways. So that's actually another thing that helped me. This network helped me to raise, right? So for the fund, one was because I was able to raise from people who knew me mostly through LinkedIn, right? So, for example, not people who I only stayed in touch through public posts on LinkedIn, but I didn't really have a one-on-one chat for many years. They would still tell me that, oh, I know you, Ihar. I've been following you on LinkedIn for many years. So, maybe I would invest in your fund.
Wow, that's really impressive that you have such a strong online presence and people really believe in you that without even meeting, well, I guess eventually meeting you in
Of course,
person,
actually,
but
yeah.
being able to invest in Fund One, that definitely says a lot about the quality and content you put out there. And then switching gears slightly, yes, you are a great networker, great community builder, but you also have this impressive background working at big tech companies like Google, like Facebook, working at scaled startups as well. So how has your engineering background helped you as a GP today?
I think the most important angle is that it sets me apart from vast majority of GPs, right? So I only know like couple other GPs who have engineering background, and most have other more like financial background or some other kind of background. And it helps me to connect on a different level with technical founders, especially CTOs or CEOs that are extremely technical. And both helps me better understand what they're doing, but it helps them that they don't feel like they're talking to somebody who has no clue what they're talking about, right? So that often helps me to win deals, but also helps to find this like kind of brilliance when when it's early and there is not enough traction on the financial side. That's one side. On the other side, it's interesting. It's like there is a mirror side to it, that when I meet a CEO who is not technical enough, they actually can lean on my, and I still want to invest in them. Like they can lean on my technical side to help them. For example, I did participate in interviews to help and planning and strategizing to help CEOs hire CTOs or VPs of engineering. So because I know what to look for there, right? So I wouldn't be able to help them hire CMO, but I would be able to help them hire CTO or VP of engineering, right? So that's actually definitely a good angle. Another interesting angle that I end up raising a lot from engineers. So we have now this interesting situation that I pitch to startups that we want to invest in, that we are a unique fund, that we have 100 and more engineering LPs who are all invested in the fund, and they're very interested to try your solution. So especially that's interesting to those startups that are building developer tools for engineers, or also of other startups that need engineering eyes on their product.
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting selling point, especially as you are investing in the early stages where getting those connections and feedback must be incredibly valuable for the founders you back. And you or Geek Ventures has a very interesting approach to investing where you back immigrant founders coming to the US. So, could we just talk a little bit more about finding these founders too? And what qualities are you really looking for them? And how are you kind of vetting them to say, okay, I mean, you're building a company, which is one already complex and risky endeavor, but then you're also moving to a whole new country with all these interesting dynamics, which are not the
Yeah.
same anywhere else in the world. So, what do you really look out for when finding these founders?
So one interesting, important thing is that the best founders are founders in general, founders who went through some adversity, who faced tough odds and to became a winner, right? So who know how to work through difficulties, right? So people who were not like cuddled through their life and were not in comfort through their whole life. Immigration is one of those difficulties, right? So deciding to abandon your place where you grew up, your friends, your social circle, and move to completely another place and build it all from scratch is showing us grit and determination, but also it's about ambition, right? So I came to the US because it's the place for ambitious people. It's the place to, which is set up to help people be more successful. It's a place where ambitions become reality, and people who want to proactively move to the US are people who show ambition. And of course, it's not easy, right? So, and one of the most difficult things again, is building the network, but also cultural differences, right? So, and unless you move from like super culturally close country, even then there is no country that's exactly like America, right? But like even Canada has cultural differences. But imagine moving from Eastern Europe or Africa or Latam or Southeast Asia, right? These are all like extremely different cultures. Moving to the US as a culture shock for everybody. It was a culture shock for me. And one thing is that on the winner side, people who bring different cultural perspective, they're also bringing out of the box thinking, right? So, and that's what is proven by a lot of data that shows that that majority of unicorn companies and Fortune 500 companies are co-founded by immigrants, right? Of course, we know such names as NVIDIA and Google and Stripe and SpaceX, and I can keep going, right? So we're co-founded by immigrants. And what we are looking for is we look for founders that deeply know what they are building, the space, the product, the market. They are deeply passionate about what they are building. This is where the word geek in Geek Ventures comes in. We want founders who are geeky about the subject matter, about the market, about the problem space. We are looking to people who are committed to building something significant, right? So we only want to invest in stories that could become huge, right? We want to invest in them very early, but only in those founders who believe themselves they can build something big, and we believe that they can build something big. We also want to invest only in people who show signs of exceptionalism, right? So people who have a chance to be like, top 0.1% of entrepreneurs. By the way, all entrepreneurs are already like kind of top 1% or top 0.1% by ambition, but not all entrepreneurs become successful. And it's interesting it's an interesting problem and difficulty for all VCs to try to find those entrepreneurs who will become successful. So one of the angles that we look for is focus on excellence. Right? You want founders that look to build the best product, that look to hire the best people, that look to set the very high standards for performance in their company, that look to be the best every day, that are not content with anything average, right? That are not happy with whatever they achieved so far, right? That in very broad strokes. We also look for founders who are actually creating technology, right? Who are actually using the technology and its kind of cutting edge technology if possible, applying it to real world problems. We think of ourselves as being in a good intersection between proper technology and deep technology and real world and revenue, right? So where on one side, we could think of purely deep tech funds that are okay if revenue comes 15 years later. On the other side, like purely business funds that only look at the metrics and don't care if there is technology underneath. We want both. We want real technology and also understanding where the revenues are coming from very soon. So that's where we love very strong business mind with the CEO and very strong technical mind in the CTO.
Okay, thanks for that overview. And then, so when you connect with these immigrant founders, what's usually the resources they need most help with?
And we come back to the same thing of network, right? So, and what I find is that in order to be successful, you need multiple components. So you need to build an amazing product, you need to be able to sell, you need to be able to build, to have a strong technology, and you need to be able to raise and connect. And I know there are funds that try to help, that try to focus to help the founders on like product search or sales. What I see is that ability to build a really great product and connect to your customers and pitch to your customers, they are much more innate to companies that are very difficult to fix. While network and like who you know is actually much easier to lift. So what we focus on is basically lifting the connectivity of founders and improving their network and everything about fundraising. That also something that is incredibly applicable across sectors. It doesn't matter if a startup is in healthcare or in construction or in dev tools. They all need to go through exactly the same process to fundraise. They go to mostly the same VCs. They have the same term sheets and the same process of the round. Unless you are like in these circles for a while, you often don't know. You don't know right people who go to. You don't know what you even need to do to raise the right round, right? The process, or like angels versus VCs, like how to get the right lead, what to do between leads and followers, right? So, and we help a lot there. So, for example, one of our portfolio company needed to raise a kind of a party round, and we ended up connecting them to 60 different investors between angels and VCs, and they ended up, I think, converting 20 of them to investors. Other portfolio companies, we help a lot with negotiating term sheets. The negotiation is another cultural thing that often when you come from outside of the US, you don't really know how negotiations work in the US. So help to negotiate. And interestingly enough, especially if you're a first-time founder, but sometimes even if you're a second-time founder, you might have gone through a lot of sales of your product. You might have sold your product 100 times, but you probably only negotiated term sheet once or twice or 0 times. So when the new term sheet comes to you, you don't necessarily know what's right in this term sheet, what's wrong, how to approach it. So we are always on the founder side if we invest early, for example, when the Series A term sheet comes in. We are also, of course, inviting them to write events and we building events for our portfolio founders and founders who are in general in our immigrant ecosystem, because events is a huge advantage in terms of building your network. So these are just a few things, and making sure that our community of founders that we invest in is well connected and our founders know each other. We connect them to our LPs and so on.
So, from the immigrant founders you have in your network, what's usually the biggest culture shock for them when they start to fundraise in the US? Is it just the cultural differences of negotiating a term sheet, the process itself? What's kind of the biggest hurdle for them to get over as they start to raise venture dollars in the US?
I think the biggest problem I see again and again for most founders is how difficult it is to deal with US lack of feedback and US sugarcoating. This is a very American thing, right? So when you talk to somebody, they tell you that they like you very much, they like everything, they smile at you, and then they ghost you. Or maybe they don't ghost you, but they pass. And you have no idea what went wrong, what didn't work, you get no feedback, and some founders get this treatment like tens, dozens of times or hundreds of times. So learning to ask for feedback, learning to kind of decode sugarcoating and distinguish when somebody really properly likes you and will go in and deeper versus somebody who just smiles at you but actually has no interest is thing that we often go deep in. But there is also opposite thing is on how to pitch and how to not undersell yourself, right? Especially for some cultures with much more, like radical transparency kind of approach, they often talk too much about negatives and focus not enough about, big vision or rosy picture. And US VCs that are not used to it could pass on it just because from their perspective, it feels like the founder is not confident or the founder is not big picture or founder focuses on negatives. While I know that if this founder knows how to build business, but talks a lot about the problems, it's actually, they are very real, right? And I need to help them to get through to those VCs that need more of like kind of a salesy pitch.
And then you have been building and investing in AI for quite some time now.
Yeah.
So, of course, AI is on every investor's and I mean, pretty common knowledge these days. Just curious because you've been around this technology for a while. What are some misconceptions that VCs and or the general public gets wrong about the emergence of AI and its possibilities?
I think that the general misconception for general public is usually that the general discussion is usually is very black and white. Is rather AI is useless or AI is able to do everything. While in reality, I think that AI is a tool. I think that AI emergence is obviously a new era. And it's in a way, it's similar to era of internet or era of mobile or era of cloud, right? So all of this, and this is definitely a very important thing. That's why we focus specifically on AI right now, because we think it's incredibly important. At the same time, I don't believe in doomerism of like that AI will replace everything and everybody. I think AI will replace a lot and AI will be a significant force, but it will also take some time, right? So I don't think that AI will create, huge unemployment like next year, right? So I think that 10 years from now, a lot of jobs will look different, right? And a lot of new jobs will appear. By the way, that's another angle on doomerism, right? So that while there will be people losing jobs because of AI, but there will also be people who are getting jobs because of AI and the jobs that wouldn't exist if there was no AI. That's an important thing. Another thing that I feel that a lot of people get wrong is that they feel that we are in AI bubble or AI hype. And from what is interesting is that unless you are investing in precedent seed yourself, like we do, and you only consume AI information through the media, you can see that, yes, there are companies like Thinking Machines by Mira Murati that's raising a $2 billion seed round at $10 billion valuation while having nothing yet besides the vague idea. And you start thinking that, oh my God, all AI is overpriced. The reality is there are thousands, tens of thousands of AI companies that are priced kind of the same as SaaS companies early stage were priced 10 years ago, right? So, well, maybe like 50% higher. Maybe instead of doing like 7 million posts, they're like 10 million posts, right? So it's barely adjusting for inflation, which is very important because it's AI at the entry level, like pre-seed seed is not overpriced. But another thing that many people don't realize is that AI enables companies to grow much faster and get to revenue and get to product being ready and so on, right? So especially when you build software right now, it's no excuse to have like no revenue for 3 years, but 10 years ago it was okay. So these are a few things that are important. Of course, it is important to distinguish between companies that overuse the hype of AI and companies that actually have proper product, right? So inside, and this is what we're looking very deeply, is that we want to see that the companies we invest in, they have proper complexity inside that is difficult to replace. But what is also important that you're not only looking for technology complexity, because after all, this is very important that right now kind of rewrite software for another startup, right? So software itself and technology is not a moat big enough to invest. We are looking for moats beyond software and technology. We are looking for perfect product understanding, perfect customer understanding. We are looking for data moats, which is incredibly important. We are looking for network moats. We are looking for lock-in moats, right? So this is very important. And all of these moats are now more important than technology moats. While even OpenAI, which is obviously a very strong technologically company, might not have strong enough technology moat when we see companies like Anthropic and Meta and Google are building solutions which are technologically similar or better than technology by OpenAI.
Yeah, that's something we talk about as a fund too. Us at Alpha Partners, we're also looking to invest in AI companies as well, just at a slightly later stage than where you're all at. And yeah, it's definitely the biggest question we have with most of these companies is what is the long-term sustainable moat? How are you different? Because it's more or less easy enough to build up the tech, but it's the ecosystem around you, the channel partners, how sticky you are with your customers, data. I mean, all that stuff just has greater emphasis. And
Let me add something actually. Another thing that I think not everybody sees, and it's not a misconception per se, I think it's just like blindness, that we are in an era, thanks to AI, where we will have way more unicorns than we had before. And the word unicorn becomes a complete misnomer because it used to be a rare beast. Right now, we have a lot of them, but I think we will have hundreds more of them. I think we will have like tens of thousands of unicorns, meaning billion-dollar companies by 2030 or after. And they will be like probably single billions, right? Still be harder to build a $10 billion company. But a combination of so many factors together will allow to build companies to, let's say, this 100 million ARR or 200 million ARR, which creates pretty much a $1 billion valuation, much easier than 15 years ago. And there are things that are not AI related, like, for example, globalization and how easier it is now to get customers from all over the world, including, like countries that are very much in the developing mode. But also AI makes it so much easier to build better product, build it faster, to build sales pipeline, to scale, that we are now in the very early days of this parade of like huge parade of unicorns that will happen in, by end of this decade or the next decade.
yeah, I mean, that'll definitely be interesting to see. I mean, the growth of some of these companies that are reaching, yeah, hundreds of millions of ARR faster than what we've seen with SaaS companies
Yeah.
previously is exciting. And, multiple of them in markets that are big enough to support it all. And then one thing we kind of talked about in the previous call together was just the makeup of teams at a lot of these AI startups.
Yeah.
Historically, it's been oh, wow, you've hired a bunch of people. You have a team of 20. Like, you're a great growing company. You're doing well. Where now the script has almost flipped to say, okay, you've gone to this scale with a team of 5. So I know you have a background as a hiring manager while you were VP of engineering at startups and a big tech. And so if you could just explain your thinking behind why it's better, in your opinion, to have smaller teams to get to these scales and what you think early stage venture backed startups in terms of an organizational makeup are going to look like going forward.
Yeah, it's a huge change in the last 3, 4 years because before it was always correlated, the success of a company, the traction, and the headcount, right? So, and the headcount was something that was easy to track from outside. When the company keeps revenue secret, you can just see how many employees they have on LinkedIn, right? So, but now it's so obvious that it's reverse. And when I see kind of a seed level or pre-seed company with 20 employees, it's a pass, right? So I don't want to invest in a company that has 20 employees, well, less than a million ARR, right? And the angle there are several angles there. First of all, to me, the low kind of revenue per employee shows that there is not enough automation in the company. There is not a lot of manual work, which is in nowadays is wrong. It shows that the company leadership is not focused enough on utilizing the technology, right? And I don't care what kind of work these people do. Maybe these are engineers, maybe these are customer support, maybe these are marketing people, right? But you don't need that, 20, 30 people at a company that's like doing 100K or 500K ARR in this market. And it creates a lot of overhead, right? So you need to manage these people. You need to figure out, their issues, their vacations, and so on. But it also shows, back to what I said, questions of focus on excellence. Because after all, hiring 20 proper stars, A players, is extremely hard. Hiring 4 is much easier. But it also shows when you're hiring 3 or 4 people and they're amazing, and you do the work that previously a team of 20 could do, it actually shows that you are focusing on finding great people. It's also about the pay, right? So usually larger teams mean that you have on average lower salary, lower compensation per person. This is also typically correlated with how strong they are, right? And it's funny that even big companies understand it. Like according to rumors, Zuckerberg offers like hundreds of millions of dollars per person, right? And this is only possible when your team is small, right? So it's like, of course, we don't want our startups to offer hundreds of millions of dollars per person, right? But when you look for amazing, exceptional people, you can only hire 2, 3, 4 of them when you have $2 million in their seed round or pre-seed round, right? So you cannot really hire 20 amazing people. You can hire 20 people for 50K a year, but they will not be amazing, right? So this is a big thing. And I look for companies that start with automation perspective because you will need to scale, right? Most likely it's stupid to not hire and just be like one person $1 billion company, right? So it's actually better to hire at least 1 or 2 people to help you with something. But it's so much better to hire after you have developed a lot of the playbook and automation and so on, and then hire somebody who is amazing and will up-level the team and will take the existing playbook and run with it, as opposed to hire a bunch of people who will like stumble across like on top of each other's feet, right? So like in trying to develop these playbooks.
So you are a solo GP of your own fund. You have a few people working alongside you. How do you kind of think about building your own organization or how to find A players in the venture fund world and not necessarily the startup world?
Yes. So I have now a 5 people investment team and a couple more on the assistant operations side, but which is, I know is typically area for larger funds, but I believe inherently that VC is a people business, right? So I cannot automate talking to a founder, right? And the founders would not appreciate that. And we will not learn from automation. Of course, we cannot automate talking to our LPs. We cannot automate talking to you or other VCs, right? So what we need brilliant people who can talk, who can bring the network, who can connect, who can find people. So basically, Right now, our composition is I have a partner, Alex, who is in Israel, and he joined us a couple years ago. And he brings a lot of experience from VC world. He has been formerly in different VC firms for about 12 years and brings this like financial background that is more traditional for VC. And he brings his own network, right? So he brings Israeli network, he brings big European network, and he brings his own different ability to do due diligence than I do. You have two associates that both bring us a huge ability to network and talk to companies. And for example, last year, Sarah Romanko joined us as an associate, and her unique A-player skill is that she, as ultimate networker, even though she's kind of young and joined VC world recently, she knows everybody. Everybody knows her, and I still think that this conundrum that she never been in New York, but every time I go to New York event, everybody tells me, "Oh, Geek Ventures, that's where Sarah works, right?" And that kind of person is a perfect person for us to add to our deal flow and to talk to founders. And we have an analyst who can work and with AI and with processing things like building a thesis on a sector, analyze the competition, go deeper in due diligence. And we don't need army of analysts, right? So we don't need army of people crunching numbers. But this team helps us to actually talk, have 30-minute Zoom calls, go in person for coffee to up to 100 startups a month, right? So I couldn't do it alone, right? So nobody could do it alone. But this way, we are priding ourselves on being the VC that can really go through a lot of startups to find those needles, those pearls that we need to pick when we invest in about one company a month, but we talk to hundreds.
My last question for you. So you mentioned how, with a lot of the startups that you're backing, you have the Metas of the world, which are dropping these really big pay packages to get the top AI talent. And then, you building a fund yourself, you really want that A player team. And, you're an emerging manager. That's risky I mean, I know myself as a junior investor thinking about where I want to join as a fund, there's a lot of consideration that goes into that and, dedicating a good portion of your life. And depending on if you get carry or not, like you're tied up in the fund for a while. If you're joining a startup, ideally, yeah, you're getting equity. You're tied up in that company for a while. So, do you have any advice for founders of early stage startups and then also GPs of emerging managers, what they could really do to really get that top tier talent and to convince them to join this, the start of this journey at something that's risky and early instead of going for one of the bigger players out there?
If we are talking about joining VC, now, unfortunately, the situation for people who want to join VC is very difficult because I feel that there is a huge imbalance in jobs in terms of supply and demand. There are very few VC jobs available, and there are so many people who want to join VC. So my only advice would be, especially for people who never held a job in VC and are looking to get one, is take any job that you can in order to at least get on this ladder if you really want to be in VC, and make sure to stand out. Last time we had an open position for associate and I think for analyst as well. We got more than 500 applications, right? So and it's difficult for us to process all of them, but then you need to stand out, get warm intros, bring portfolio, bring track record, bring a pitch deck. I've seen that, or, like do something to stand out when you're trying to get an VC. And then, of course, it's very different when you already have been on a proper full-time job in VC and several years later, you're looking to, potentially upgrade or move. And there, what's important is the network, and are you bringing the real network with you? That's the only thing in VC that matters. Are you really bringing the capacity to bring new deals? On startup side, the one important thing is that thinking of it as an investor, right? So many people still look at startup job, especially early startup job, as a job, but it's an investment because whenever you are getting significant portion of your compensation in stock. Imagine this, right? So if you have a choice between joining a public company for $200K a year or a startup for $100K a year plus stock, think of this. You are investing $100,000 every year in this company. Is this the best company that you see to invest your money in, right? And of course, most people who are joining startups, they don't have experience to do investment decisions, and I understand that. But start with the same kind of first principles. Do you believe that this company is focusing on excellence? Do you believe these founders are thinking big enough? Do you believe that this company is really trying to outrun their competition? And know this, that one big thing, one big important thing, that if your company will be successful, the job will be really hard. Meaning that the companies that are most successful are typically the ones where people work the most, the hardest, that have a lowest work-life balance in the early stages. If you want better work-life balance, that's public companies, right? So yeah.
Okay, well, this has been a wonderful discussion, Ihar. Thank you so much for joining the podcast. I just want to leave the floor open right now if you have any last thoughts you want to share with the audience, or if there's a way for people to get in touch with you.
So first of all, of course, you can get in touch, right? So it's LinkedIn, it's my email, it's easy to find online, right? So it's ihar@geek.vc, right? So we have a form on our website where you can pitch your startup through the form to us. Of course, you can find me on events in New York and occasionally in SF as well. But most important is, if you are thinking about starting a company, you should know it's very, very hard. It's not for everybody. And realistically, 90% of people who are starting a company fail, and they get way less money than if they went to get a job somewhere. So you need to understand that. But it's possible and it's rewarding. I also think that it's possible and rewarding to start a VC firm. So if you have network, if you invest, if you have invested, think of starting a VC firm. Reach out to me if you're thinking about that. And this is also very rewarding. So go do that.
All right. Thank you so much, Ihar. Take care. Bye.
Thank you, Zaya. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Driving Alpha podcast, where we host top investors to demonstrate how they outperform the market. Click subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. Driving Alpha is supported by Affinity, provider of the CRM for the private capital relationship economy. Affinity knows who has the best relationship with the right startup. Affinity knows. Learn more at affinity.co/driving alpha.